Good morning, everybody. Good day, rather. We are just waiting for a few participants to join in, and then we can formally begin. We have two of our presenters already here. Rochelle, if you could just say hi, if you're here, and Sunia, you're as
Yes,
well.
I'm here, Aisha. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sunia, you're here as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. We are just waiting for three more participants, and I think we can begin post that. Here we have another presenter. So Frederick, welcome. Yeah, we'll just wait for two more participants who are going to be joining us, two more presenters, and then we can begin. I will just mute myself until then. So Frederick, I think you can mute yourself for now.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir. Hi, sir. Yes, duly noted. I will let you know when the audio comes on. I'm just waiting for the participant. Sela is here. Sela, actually. Sela, you are here. I was trying to call you, and Salome as well. I hope she is joining in immediately. Sela, if you could kindly unmute yourself and let me know so we can begin the session immediately.
Yes.
Is Salome joining in soon, or is she going to take some time? Okay, I think she's here. Okay. So I think I can finally begin with my session. Am I clear? You can hear my voice clearly. Okay, perfect. So
Yes,
good
ma'am.
day to one and all, to the presenters as well as participants. A very warm welcome to you, and it gives me great pleasure to be chairing this session and to have you all present here. And I hope everybody has a very fruitful time with us today. A few things to keep in mind since we are kind of a little delayed on schedule. We are around 11 minutes late, but let's try and keep it on time for the future. A few things to keep in mind for presenters. Please note you have 10 minutes to present your paper. At 8 minutes, I will use the option of raise hand and also drop in a text in the chat box reminding you that you've already reached 8 minutes. Okay, and for the participants, if you all have any questions, I want you all to put it in the chat box. Please do not interrupt the presenters. All the questions will be answered towards the end of the session, okay, depending on time. So I will keep track of the questions and we will have a discussion towards the end. And with that, I think we can begin for today. Any questions? So far, so good? So I think if you all have to grab a cup of chai or coffee and just sit back and relax and have a good time, yeah? Um, the first presenter for today is our very own Sir Frederick. He has been my teacher at university, and it gives me immense pleasure to be sharing the panel with him. And yep, I think over to him, and I'll mute myself now. And so you can begin now.
Yeah. Can you hear me clear?
Very clear, sir. You can start.
Okay. So I won't take much time. I won't abuse the fact that Aisha has been my student and things like that. I'll be very short and I'll be brief and to the point. My paper is extremely long. All the details are in it. I've actually tried to make use of this occasion to look back at the left within Goa, both in colonial and post-colonial times, pre-61 and post-61. I'm sure the papers will be circulated, and it's fine if it goes around and gets passed around. So I'll just make my points briefly today before I start off or things like that. Okay, so I start my paper by describing what my Polish friend Marek, who actually grew up under the Iron Curtain and what we then called actually existing socialism, it's mostly not existing anymore, had to say about Che Guevara. He called him a murderer and someone unethical and an untrustworthy person. You get similar points of views in different responses as we were discussing in the first session. The media, the dominant media model is mostly critical of him, though he's also made into an icon when it is possible to sell him as a Hollywood film or as a T-shirt or whatever. So I asked one of my a villager, one of my villagers who had come to my house, and I asked him, "Who's this guy on your shirt?" I said, "Francis, who's this guy on your shirt?" I was just curious to know how he perceived the issue. He told me, "I don't know. It must be Bob Marley or someone of that sort." He said. So from starting off on a light note, we will go to the serious aspect of the issue. Uh, like I was saying a bit earlier in the chat boxes, that I feel, we don't understand our history and we forget a lot of it because we don't track it and we don't write about it, which is why it's very important for the younger generation to be aware of the past and to keep track of these events. Uh, so looking at Goa, I called my paper actually Chair's Ideological Kin, the Forgotten World of Goa's Radical Politics. And I start off by mentioning, uh, how exactly the same ideological trend which Chair was part of was actually influencing certain sections of Goan population and thought. I'm not taking a value judgment on it. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not saying it's our job to judge today whether they did right or wrong. But I'm saying this was there. This is interesting. This is something we probably need to understand and get to know about. So I start off by mentioning a party called the Front Popular, which contested the 1963 elections. In those days, to use the word communist in Goa was very politically unacceptable, as it is now. It's out of fashion, but in those days it was unacceptable. So this party, instead of calling themselves the CPI or something like that, they called themselves the Front Popular, and also Janta Agadi in Marathi. And they contested 8 seats. They won no seats, but their influence was there nonetheless. You can find references to them in small footnotes about the first elections in Goa in 1963. There were also books written on Goa, like for example, Goan Society and Transition. If you read a book, it's a very unusual take on Goan society and how it changed, how it shaped up. And actually, it was written by Bento Gracian D'Souza, who died recently in 2015. But it was the guide for the book was actually someone called A.R. Desai, who was a prominent sociologist in Bombay University. He was a Trotskyite, which is a brand of Marxism. And if you can see, the perspective that comes across there. Then going along the text, I kind of try to explain different points in Goan history which are not much studied today, or which are probably not even known of. So right from 1910, the Republican Revolution, the way uh, counter thoughts came up to what was then the mainstream ideology. So Goa was a very conservative society, a religious society, and socially conservative, politically conservative. So one thing that struck me as interesting was the role of, say, some groups who were probably groups and individuals who were Freemasons within Goa. Uh, I'm again not taking stands on whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm saying these aspects of Goa need to be studied. And here I've quoted some, some interviews that I've conducted with people whose family members were part of these trends and who acknowledge it today. Like for example, Antonio Di Noronha, who wrote the book The Hindus of Goa, and some other books also, was a Freemason according to his own family members. He's not related to me, but these were the points. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in some ways it is a trend which looks at a counter to the dominant ideology, and the left wing ideology is also another of these trends which kind of contest the dominant position of those times. So then I also take a look. Sorry, sorry for that. I also take a look at the role of the Portuguese Communist Party towards Goa, towards the end of colonialism in Goa, towards what they saw as the future of Goa and things like that, which is a pretty complicated kind of arrangement, because don't forget that they had to take a stand which made sense internationally, and at the same time they had to kind of please their own audience in Portugal. But having said that, what they said was very interesting, and I'm really grateful to some of the young Portuguese scholars like Filipa Souza Lopes, whose thesis looks at the opposition to Salazar in Portugal and how that shaped the Goan debate. So she's done a full thesis on this point. I will not go into the issues here because we will it will drag for time. So there's a lengthy section on that. Then I also talk about left-wing politics influencing Goa in the post-61 era, like for example the French Popular, which I mentioned briefly earlier. Radical student politics in the 1970s and 1980s. There is a section on it. I've quoted Sandesh Prabhudesai's chapter on this period. Also mentioned Dr. Sushila Savant Mendes's chapter. Many of us have actually grown through this period. So if we were not personally involved, we were friends of people involved. So it's a very fascinating period, and if there are any students in history, I would urge you all look at it. Don't let it go forgotten because we are not working in understanding our own history. Today, the situation is that foreigners from Portugal, Brazil, maybe other parts of the world know more about Goan history, literature than we ourselves do, which is a shame in that sense. So Sandesh Prabhudesai makes this point about the Progressive Students Union and its own radical politics, which actually he says, he suggests here that the mass awareness campaigns of the student movement in Goa turned leftist from 1982 onwards, with the third generation of students movement in the name of the Progressive Students Union, PSU, going to the extent of propagating Marxist-Leninist thought by giving slogans like Naxalbari Ek Hi Rasta, that Naxalbari is the only road, if you translate it into English. Uh, there were also trade union leaders very close to your college, like for example, Gerard Pereira. His book called Pre-Portuguese History of Goa is perhaps the only book in English on that era, because there are a lot of books on the Portuguese era, which is a long era, but there are very few books on the pre-Portuguese era. So his book was recently released after his son passed away. His son was Talman Pereira. So Talman and we were in college together. So I asked Talman one day, I put it in a footnote here. I asked Talman, who are you named after? Because I knew where the answer was coming from. And we in Goa have this habit of naming our children after prominent people from all over the world. So for instance, we have, we have the Titos and the Salazars and the Hitlers. People have these names actually. I'm not making a joke. In Goa, people actually have these names. So I asked Talman, who were you named after? So he told me that he was named after Ernst Thälmann, who the head of the German Communist Party between 1918 and 1930, somewhere thereabout, when it was a very popular communist party. And his father was a trade unionist called Gerard Pereira, who died and who was involved in organizing the port workers in different parts of the state, particularly in the Vasco area, which I'm sure some of your parents would have known in those. I'm talking about the students. So then my next point is that even the church itself was not immune to leftist thought and influences in a milder way. I'm not saying that the entire church shifted, but there were sections of individuals who actually were part of these protests. So for example, I've mentioned this ecumenical coalition of third world theologians, which had its members in Goa. Then there was another former Jesuit priest called Kristanand Desai. Today he's Dr. Kristanand Desai, who lived and worked with the port labor in Mormugao, and he has done a doctorate on the history of the trade union movement in India, which is not trade union movement in Goa, sorry, which is hardly
Sir,
known, and which is, yeah,
I
sorry.
love the references that you're making and you're correlating with Goa, but 10 minutes are already up. I would like for you
Yes,
to kind of wrap up.
yes, I will wind up.
Yeah,
Give me 1 minute more, Aisha, okay?
yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead, sir.
So all these references are in the paper. I will not take your time. There were groups in Goa like the Free Goa newspaper, which whose editorial board was pretty influenced by left-wing thought and things like that. But even freedom fighters and Dharmanand Kosambi and things like that, it's their role by being influenced with leftist thought is well documented. This is a Soviet poster which you can see, which shows it's a bit of a cliched poster, but it shows the Indian forces kicking out the Portuguese, and this is Goa. It's spelled in Russian. I've quoted Nandakumar Kamath talking about other influences between Cuba and India. All these references are there, so it's nothing. Anyone who wants to follow it up can easily do it. But the most fascinating chapter, and on this, I'll give me half a minute, is about the 3 or 4 Goans who played a key role in the international movement, in the international leftist movement, and shaped actually countries and developments in Africa and other parts of the world. One was Aquino Braganza, who was left hand, who was sorry, left hand is a bit of a pun, who was a right hand of Samora Machel, the first president of Mozambique. He actually died in the same plane crash as Samora. The second was Pio Gama Pinto, who fought for the independence of Kenya and after that was assassinated. It is not known till today by who he was assassinated, probably by the ruling uh, party members, some of them who actually wanted to take over the country and get affluent in a hurry. The third is of course Pio Gama Pinto, and yeah, and the third is the most interesting character. She was a young student, a doctor called yeah, a young doctor. Where is it? Who actually fought in Angola, called Sita Wallace, and her story was not known in Goa. She was 26 years old when she decided to have a revolution against the revolution because she felt the leaders there were going on the wrong road. And today she is probably proven right because Angola, while it has a lot of poverty, has become one of the country with the most rampant corruption in Africa and things like that. And when we discovered it, we were really shocked that we did not know about her at all. But these are the kind of characters who have shaped the Goan debate, and I think it's important to keep track of them, to know them. Having said this, on this note, one can spend much time to ponder about the complexities, some of which we have ourselves lived through, and connect the dots between the diverse global parts of the world in places which we never knew them to exist. So I would urge students to please pay attention to this part of our history and maybe follow it up. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Aisha, for giving me the time.
Thank you so much, sir. I thoroughly enjoyed reading your paper. There is so much of content in it and references made. I will definitely share it with everybody. After, I think we are going to compile all the papers and share it with participants. And yeah, it was really a delight to go through everything and how many, the number of references that you've made. Nobody would have really thought that there are so many connections that we can make with Shea and Goa. And thank you for that. Thank you for all your contribution and beautifully presenting your paper. Girls, everybody, sorry, participants, you all can please put in your questions in the chat box. I will keep a track of it, and even I'll post my questions towards the end. Now we can move on to our next paper by Sela Pereira and Simon Coutinho on Che Guevara's India's Cuban hero. Okay. Again, please be reminded that you have 10 minutes. At 8 minutes, I would be using the raise hand option and dropping in a text in the chat box to remind you that you have only 2 minutes left. Yeah. Thank you so much, and you all can take over. Simon, I think there's a bit of an issue on your end. There's a lot of disturbance. I think it's the fan. Okay. Can we just do a test with the voice? You can keep your video on as well so the participants can see
Good morning.
who you are. Good
Can you
morning.
hear me?
Good morning, Stella. I can hear you. Your voice is quite clear. Simon, if you could also do a test, please. Not quite audible.
How about now?
Can you please try again? Simon, are we ready to start?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. So, what we
Uh,
can do here, since there are two presenters, when one person is presenting, the other can mute yourself, and vice versa. Okay, so that there is no disturbance from both sides. Okay, y'all can keep your cameras on. We would love to see both of you. Yeah, perfect. Simone, I can see you. So I think when Sela is presenting, she can keep her camera on. Yeah, you may begin.
okay. Warm greetings from Goa. I, Simon Coutinho,
And I, Stella Pereira.
from St. Xavier's College, Maxar, Goa, will be taking you through today's presentation on Che Guevara's visit to India. Stella, have you ever come across the quote, "You can kill a person but not his ideas"?
Oh, yes. I think I read that in a book once.
Well,
But
this quote is
who is
said by
that
none
quote
other
by?
than the Argentinian revolutionary Che Guevara himself.
Che Guevara.
No,
Well,
no. In
Simon,
fact, he
was
earned this
Che his
nickname
real
from his
name?
frequent use of the expression "che", which was perceived as foreign by his comrades.
Wow. He seems like an interesting
Yes,
man.
no doubt
Didn't
about
he
that.
visit India
Come,
once?
let us share with the others what we have learned about him through our research.
Yes. I must be eager to know more. You take the lead.
Indian-Cuba relations have been traditionally warm and friendly, with India being among the first countries to recognize Cuba after the 1959 revolution. When Che Guevara touched down in India in June 1959, he was received with a warm welcome at the Delhi airport. During his two-week official visit, he met the then Prime Minister Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru over lunch and travelled around India. In his report, Che Guevara wrote, "Nehru received us with an amiable familiarity of a patriarchal grandfather, but with noble interest in the dedication and struggles of the Cuban people, commending our extraordinary valiance and showing unconditional sympathy towards our cause."
Acknowledging that Nehru's words of advice were of immense significance, Che Guevara wrote in his report that his tour of India taught him that real development could be brought with economic progress and technical advancement. He also said that research in the fields of medicine, chemistry, physics, and agriculture was an utmost necessity for technical and economic progress. Though Cuba did have a consulate in Calcutta, India had no diplomatic setup in Cuba. Che was clear of the need to strengthen economic ties and would ask Nehru to open an embassy in Cuba. Che Guevara met with several leaders, such as the Commerce Minister, Defense Minister, and members of the Planning Commission. Che interacted with the scientists at the Agricultural Research Institute and National Physical Laboratory. He also met with the Minister for Community Development and Cooperation and the Minister for Food and Agriculture. Che hoped to import from India coal, cotton textiles, jute goods, edible oils, tea, film and trainer aircraft, and wanted to export copper, rayon cords for tires, cocoa, and most importantly, sugar. Indian President Ramnath Kovind visited Cuba in 2018. During his visit, the Indian president made several agreements within the areas of biotechnology, homeopathy, and therefore the traditional system of medication and medicinal plants were signed.
A communist or a socialist? Which one do you think he was, Stella?
A communist.
Well, not actually. Since he was born a Catholic, Che claimed to be a socialist who believed in equality and freedom from exploiting other countries. And despite Guevara's close ties to violence, he had a deep respect for Mahatma Gandhi and Satyagraha, the method of resistance that was largely responsible for India's non-violent struggle during the freedom movement. This reveals his broad-minded outlook towards political struggles with a different historical context, as well as his recognition of ideas resistant to revolutionary violence. During his time in Delhi, Guevara was also interviewed by journalist K.P. Banumati for All India Radio, where Che quipped, "You have Gandhi and an old philosophical heritage. In our Latin America, we have neither. That is why our mindset has developed differently."
During his India tour, Che Guevara made a mysterious revelation about Krishna. We had an opportunity of meeting a white person called Krishna, who seemed like a person far above our world of today, Che Guevara wrote to his boss in Cuba. Indian-Cuban relations. There were several high-level visits between leaders of the two countries. Cuban President Socialist visited India in 1973 and 1983. Indian Prime Ministers Rajiv Gandhi and Manmohan Singh visited Cuba in 1985 and 2006 respectively. India opened its embassy in Havana in January 1960, just 6 months after Guevara's visit. This had particular significance because it symbolized Indian solidarity with the revolution. Cuba maintains an embassy in the national capital. India has always voted in favor of UN General Assembly resolutions opposing to the US embargo against Cuba. Cuba has publicly expressed support for India's candidature for a permanent seat in the Security Council on numerous occasions. Cubans were also members of the non-aligned movement. Fidel Castro stated, "The majority of Cuba, its unconditional adherence to the principles which lay at the inspiration of the non-aligned movement give us the assurances that under the wise leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, the non-aligned countries will continue advancing in their inalienable role as a bastion for peace, national development." The commodities exported from India to Cuba mostly include pharmaceutical products, organic chemicals, plastic and rubber articles, machinery, and mechanical appliances. The commodities Cuba exports to India are tobacco products, including cigars, raw hides and skins, and leather. Cher's daughter Olivia visited India almost 20 years ago.
Che Guevara is synonymous with rebellion and the struggle against capitalism. He is regarded as a hero by leftists worldwide. A popular slogan heard on Indian streets during any protest by left-wing activists is "Che, तेरे सपनों को हम मंजिल तक पहुंचाएंगे," which accurately translates to "Che, we are going to realize your dreams." The flame of his legacy will glow forever in India, and he is a revered icon in Indian activist circles even decades after his death. Reflecting on this metaphoric presence of the Cuban leader, Basit Abu Bakr, an activist of the left-wing Bhagat Singh Ambedkar student organization, notes, "Our organization goes back to his political teachings to use them as a prism to understand the modern capitalist evils plaguing our society."
A man whose vision continues to fire many a revolutionary, Che Guevara's visit to India laid the foundations for what we know today as the India-Cuba relationship. With his visit, a new history of bilateral ties began. The warmth and mutual respect between the two nations has flourished ever since, with both India and Cuba expressing solidarity for each other on not one but many occasions. Communist revolutionary Che Guevara lived on, he would be 92 now, but exactly 53 years ago, he was shot dead by secret agents with the help of the forces of Bolivia while promoting revolution there. As Che would always say, hasta la victoria siempre, ever onward to victory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon and Sila, for first of all adhering to time and for giving us a beautiful insight into all the work that Che has put in along with India to build such good relationship between both the countries. Thank you so much. We will go through questions towards the end. Yeah. Next, we have Rochelle Fernandez, assistant professor at Dempe College. She is going, the title of her paper is Understanding Dissent, a reading into Mahashweta Devi Mother of 184 at Alpha Shah's Night March. Okay, so I think again, I would like to remind you that you have to keep in, at 8 minutes, I will remind you with the raise hand option, and I will let you know at 10 minutes when you're almost about to wind up. Yeah, all over to you.
Yes. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Hi, Rochelle. Yes, you are.
Okay, fine, great. So good day. The title of my paper is Understanding Dissent, a reading of Mahashweta Devi's Mother of 1084 and Shah's Night March, a journey into India's Naxal heartlands. At the onset, I'd like to flesh out what I have come to understand is the understanding of, come to understand is the meaning of the term dissent. It is derived from the Latin verb dissentare, literally meaning to differ in sentiment. In political theory, dissent is associated with one, a difference of opinion with regards to existing norms or legal political structures, and two, disagreement with these norms and structures, and therefore even the ability to challenge these norms or structures. Dissent therefore implies both the possibility and the opportunity to engage with and criticize the status quo. And this is where Guevara comes in. Richard Harris, in his reflections on Che Guevara's legacy in 1998, wrote that Che felt that the struggle against capitalism and the construction of a new socialist society required a new type of human being who would be willing to make personal sacrifices for the good of others. The idea of personal sacrifice immediately brought in the idea of Mahatma Gandhi and how he is revered. And however, the more people read about Gandhi, the more problematic he seems to be, especially because he opposed the end of the caste system. In fact, Arundhati Roy mentions that Gandhi's refusal to allow working class people and untouchables to create their own political organizations and elect their own representatives remained consistent too. This goes completely against what individuals like Guevara envisioned for the marginalized. Partha Chatterjee uses Gramsci's concept of passive revolution to give the reader an understanding of how the bourgeoisie used certain tactics in order to attain hegemony. He says that the bourgeoisie appropriates the support of the popular masses but excludes them from any form of direct participation in the process of governance. Using this idea to understand the Indian national movement, Chatterjee reveals how the support of the masses, especially the peasants, was approved by both Gandhi and Nehru to bring about independence. However, once India had gained freedom, the peasants no longer figured in the national framework of politics. Therefore, only dissent that was sanctioned was accepted. And yet here we are celebrating two very important and divergent individuals, which bring me to the crux of this paper. That is, if we are celebrating dissent for the greater good, why not celebrate all such dissenters? And to further elaborate on the sentiment, I have attempted a reading of Mahashweta Devi's Mother of 1084 and Alpa Shah's Night March, because both these texts are focused on documenting the Naxal revolution through fiction and non-fiction, respectively. I've chosen to focus on the Naxalite movement because of how closely connected their ideologies and fight is to what Guevara's was, and how close their fight is to home. Bhattacharjee, in her Mahashweta Devi, A Sentinel of Her Times 2016, speaks of how the Naxalite movement of the late 1960s deeply stirred the imagination of Mahashweta Devi, and that her only son, Nabarun, was involved with the movement in some way or another. In her novel, Brati Chatterjee, a young idealistic student intellectual, is betrayed by a mole in his revolutionary group, leading to his death at the hands of the police. Brati is then reduced to corpse number 1084. His father bribes the police and hushes up the nuances of his death from the media because he did not want to be associated with the revolutionary group that his son was a part of. The novel then focuses on Rati's mother, Sridhata, the mother of corpse number 1084, and her attempt at making sense of her son's choices in life and the events that led to his death. This is when Shah's Night March, A Journey into India's Naxal Heartlands 2018 comes in. She mentions in her novel that she immersed herself amongst the Naxals in order to understand why they chose a particular way of life and understanding that Devi's Shujata yearned for. According to Shah, drawn by the romance of the Naxalbari rebellion, many bright urban youth from upper and middle class families felt compelled to leave their homes and their college classrooms to work with the poor in the villages. Additionally, Shah also mentions that while some of the Maoists joined electoral politics, others like the Naxals believed that such participation was futile because it would ruin the very essence of their fight as the system was corrupt to the core. So what exactly was the Naxalbari revolution? It can be traced back to the small uprisings in the Naxalbari village of West Bengal in 1967 that was led by Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal. It started off with peasants and laborers occupying and reclaiming land, demanding for cancellation of debts and an end to bonded labor. However, things stirred up when a group of workers were laid off due to their strike, which resulted in a series of reactions. The workers lynched the landlord, the police interfered, and one officer was instantly killed. The police retaliated the next day and killed 11 people, including 8 women and 2 children, thus igniting a rebellion across the countryside. The Indian state cracked down on the Naxals, with the then Prime Minister declaring the rebels as the single gravest internal security threat facing the country and labeled them as terrorists, which in turn led to the hunting down of the Maoists and silencing of their supporters and sympathizers. Human rights activists argue that the state's desire to quell the Naxal rebellion and civilize the Adivasis had a lot to do with the state's desire to extract resources from the areas inhabited by these people, that is, forests that contain lucrative reserves of coal, iron ore, bauxite, copper, etc. Despite what appears to be a hidden agenda on the part of the Indian state, as well as the other aforementioned reasons justifying the cause of the Naxals, we at home still find it hard to empathize with them. I have come to understand several reasons for the same. One, it is our privilege that prevents us from understanding the difficulties of having to endure the humiliation that comes along with bonded labor, which is akin to slavery. Two, our textbooks and media barely gives us insight into what the tribals and outcasts face on an everyday basis, and instead labels them as terrorists, resulting in remembering the Naxalbari movement negatively. And three, our understanding of conflict and dissent is highly skewed due to Gandhi's ahimsa. Devi, in her Mother of 1084, mentions that the leaflets, papers, books, and sheets with slogans that Brati worked on were burnt as a rule. Everything was cleared without leaving a trace, and Sujata therefore was caught in a fight between that of remembering versus forgetting. What absolutely terrified Sujata was that nobody found it abnormal that everyone in the state should deny them and join in a conspiracy of pretense, the pretense of normalcy. As Shah mentions, journalists were increasingly being kept out of the guerrilla areas unless it was to show some dreaded terrorist encounter. Some journalists had reported that they were being paid not to write at all, and anyone found supporting the Maoists could be prosecuted under the UAPA. Human rights activists had already been arrested and imprisoned. An example is that of Binayak Sen. Revolutionaries were being lynched, supporters were being threatened, journalists were being silenced, and those who knew pretended not to. Dissent is death. This is how dissent is treated in a country like ours. However, this is not a justification of the wrongdoings on the part of the Naxalites, but an attempt to humanize them and understand why they do what they do. Because of the denial of the existence of these revolutionary individuals and the lack of information that surrounds such revolutionary groups like that of the Naxals, people cannot sympathize with their cause or with them. For how can one sympathize with terrorists? How many of us are actually aware of what has triggered them? How many of us know their names? We know Che Guevara, we know Mahatma Gandhi, but do we know Charu Majumdar? Do we know Kanu Sanyal? History is not always kind to all types of dissenters. History is selective, and therefore we too in our reading become selective. Shah mentions that one of the foremost reasons for supporting the Naxalites stemmed from the respect and dignity with which they treated the Adivasis, looking upon them as equal human beings. something that the Indian state was unable to do. When it comes to the dissenters, all of them are not terrorists. This generalization is one such issue that interferes with our ability to comprehend dissent, and therefore all forms of dissent is looked at negatively. For instance, the character of the Naxalite leader Gyanji. Now, of course, all the names have been changed for security purposes. He calls himself a professional revolutionary, Gyanji. Okay, he calls himself a professional revolutionary, which in his definition is an individual who has been underground for more than 20 years. Gyanji comes from a well-to-do middle-class family. He was well-educated. He believed that he was politicized at university, making him no different from Devi's Brati. After graduating, he focused on clearing the IAS exam as he believed it would help him help the politically disenfranchised. While studying, he also spent considerable amounts of time working for human rights movements. But the more he worked in spaces like this, the more he realized that the entire system of democracy in India was a farce. It was corrupt, and so even the most sincere officials could not do much for the marginalized. He understood the limitations of the civil liberties movement and came to the conclusion that a revolution was needed, one that could completely change the social system prevalent in India. It was at this moment that he decided to abandon his ambitions of government service and take up the pledge of becoming a professional revolutionary, not a terrorist. It should be noted that such a choice was obviously not an easy one. It was a personal sacrifice for the benefit of society. Breaking ties with family, leaving loved ones behind, and living in constant danger of being shot or worse still, caught alive were just some of the choices the Naxalites and individuals like Guevara had to live with. Like Guevara, there exist scores of other revolutionaries. Shah's Gyanji and Devi's Brati are just two examples. Today we have revolutionaries in the form of Kanhaiya Kumar and Father Stan Swami. Kanhaiya Kumar, I hope all of you know about him. He was the president of the JNU Students' Union. He was arrested by the Delhi police over charges of sedition for allegedly leading students to raise anti-national slogans. Students at JNU went on strike to protest his arrest. It is only recently that the Delhi government granted sanction to prosecute Kumar, which is terrifying, as this action may end up legitimizing the belief that these students and their supporters constitute a tukde tukde gang hell-bent on dividing the country instead of actually fighting for it. As Shashi Tharoor once said, patriots are increasingly dying for their country, whereas nationalists are killing for their country. Another case is that of Father Stan Swami. He is an octogenarian Jesuit priest who was arrested under the UAPA on the charges of apparently being involved with banned Maoist groups. Why? Because Father Stan Swami has dedicated his life to empowering the tribal communities in the Bihar and Jharkhand belt and was always at loggerheads with the government over tribal rights, and thus became the latest victim of the National Investigation Agency, a counter-terrorist task force. My reason for using the examples of Kanhaiya Kumar and Father Stan Swami amidst scores of other dissenters is because of how connected they are to the issues highlighted in the primary text of this paper. Kumar was a student, just like Devi's Brati, and Father Swami is involved in empowering the tribals, just like Shah's Gyanji and his group. Dissent should not be equated to conflict. Dissenters should not be equated to terrorists. Implicating dissenters using the UAPA is, as citizens of India, a direct violation of our constitutional rights. Dissenters are merely unhappy citizens voicing opinions. It is only when dissent is met with violence that conflict erupts. What is happening today is that dissent is being outlawed and dissent is silenced, which should be unacceptable. Calling a dissenter an anti-national or worse still a traitor is something that desperately needs to be put down. Dissent remains an essential test to the validity of mature democracies. It is a safety valve. Without the ability to dissent, a democracy has no meaning, for if people are unhappy in a democracy, they must be allowed to voice their woes. Only then will a democracy have value and be true to its nature. Dissent has overthrown governments in the past, but this is not reason enough to disallow dissent, to disallow the full range of free expression from discord to rebellion. Dissent also takes on different garbs. What is important is to try and understand what the cause for this dissent is, and at the same time attempt to unlearn what we believe is the right way to dissent. For honestly, there is no right way, only the right cause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, for beautifully drawing parallels between characters and real life people who we know of. Very beautifully put. And with that, I think we can start with the next session. The next presenter, that is Sunia Bora, a student of Carmel College. And her paper title is Che Guevara's Journey Across Latin America and His Visit to India. So we can begin with that. Again, please be reminded at 8 minutes, I will let you know by the raise hand option, and at 10 minutes, I will drop in a text in the chat box. You may go ahead.
Mm,
Uh,
Good afternoon, everyone.
uh, s-
Ma'am, am I audible?
yes, you are quite clear. It would be nice if you could keep your camera on.
Ma'am, it's on.
Okay. Somehow you are not visible to me. Maybe it's because of my connection, but I think you can start now.
Okay, ma'am. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunia Borua, and I'm the student, or one of the student of Carmel College. So, my paper is talking about the journey across the Latin America and the visit to India. So, I'll be not going deeply, and I will be only talking about the main points as my paper is a bit lengthy. And so here I go. So the journey for Che Guevara was a literally life changing for him, as he had visited many places like Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and many other more other places too. But before he start his journey, I would like to talk about what was there in his life before his journey began, as he had completed his course in medicine in Argentina, and he was quite impatient over the general poverty which was there among the gap between the rich and poor people. And after his accomplishment over there, he was considered as a hero, and all over the generation, all over the world. And before being the Marxist commander, and before being the revolutionary icon, or before known by Che, he went to an epic road trip with his friend, which changed his life entirely. And his friend name was Alberto Grando. He went with him out of Argentina's Colbada, and when he even if he had shared a very close bond with his friend, but the age gap never came between their friendship, because they had a 6 years age gap between them, and because they had the same uh, they had same kind of intellectual curiosity and a hunger towards the adventure, which were taken off them to the journey of Latin America. As they started his journey, or he started his journey across Latin America. He had given a world, and he thought of being a global icon, or an inspiration for everyone, for the whole world. And in his journey, he also got attached towards Marxism, and his experience of journey focused him into an armed revolution, which, according to him, was being justice to the people. And he also observed within himself that he has an interest, or he had observed that he has been travel across Latin America. And when he was traveling, he saw indigenous community where they were into a huge poverty, which caused them due to the most economic because of the economic, they went into huge poverty. And because although he had observed all this thing, and he hadn't thought of going further for his trip for search of social justice, it wasn't so surprising that he had found it. And Guevara also decided to end up his trip in US only, which was particularly to settle in an anti-American, to settle for settlement, but he didn't do that. And now, as Che Guevara visited India, nobody knew about nobody known this thing that he had ever visited India, because it is not mostly in or over anywhere. Only just the thing is, we have known about him through an article or through any report about him that he had visited India also. And one of them article which I have referred was from article of Om Janvi. And as he had said that Che Guevara had wanted to explore a new market for Cuban communities, and also he had met with the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and discussed about the mission in each other's country. While he was visiting many places, many industrial and meeting several leaders, when he visited Okla industry area, he saw that he saw for the first time the wood molding machine, and also when he visited agriculture research industry, there he saw for the first time the metal detector. And then Che Guevara also met Chile's ambassador in the New Delhi. And as it is mentioned in the report that he have been also interviewed in all radio station. And when he was returning from the Cuban, Guevara also said that in India, the World War is distinct from the spirit of the people, that they did not use to even for the tensest moment and for their struggle for the independence, the greatest demonstration of collective peaceful disconduct forced for the English colonials to live forever, which they have taken the land for the devastated during 150 years. This was the report which was submitted to the Cuban authority. And Om Janvi have also said in his report that Che mentioned about the poor condition and the famous village school and the inequality of landholders that deeply disturbed him when it is visited India or all over the world. So I sum up with this. Thank you.
You, Sonia, for charting Che Guevara's life, rather the transition of how he traveled across the world. And yeah, thank you for giving us an insight into that. With that, we have finished our paper presentation. And thank you so much for putting in all the effort to write out the papers, and kind of contribute towards the webinar. I think we can start with a question answer session now. It's 12:30, and we have around 10 minutes before the valedictory starts off. So I think let's just dive in. Let me look at the chat box. Let's begin with Sir Frederick's question for Simon and Sila. So Frederick says, do you feel that Che is sufficiently remembered in India today? What is the source of information on people like Che? Can countries like India make up their minds on their own, or just go along by what the dominant global media says about them? And he also puts a comment saying, I know this is a tough question for students, but give it a try. So would you like to kind of pitch in a little more, and so they understand the question better? And
Basically, Aisha, the point of how we understand these people, just that. What is
yeah,
our lens? What is our perspective?
yeah. So over to Simon and Sila. If you find the question is a little too difficult, I think you can just give your perspective, your idea of Che, because you have researched on him, right? So you will have some sort of idea of this personality that you've read up on, I think.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I don't think that Che is sufficiently remembered in India today because I haven't heard about him before, but because of this webinar, I got the opportunity to read about him and to know about him.
Yeah, and adding to Stella's point, like you said, Mr. Frederick, like how you saw a picture of Shay on somebody's shirt, but they didn't like know about him. We thought it was Bob Marley. So there might be stuff about him in India, but people don't exactly know who he is and what his ideas were and what he did. And the source of information, I would say that mainly books, because, like Ma'am Shreya said in the webinar, this visit to India wasn't documented that well. And in fact, it was only in 2007 where Om Thanvi, the editor for Jansata, decided to write an article and share the Guevara. And that's when the research started. So most of the information we got for our presentation actually was from there, from the article that he wrote.
Well, thank you, Sela and Simone, for your answer. I would like to add to Simone, like how she says, I don't think Che is remembered enough. All we know is his face on most sweatshirts or t-shirts, and we don't really know who he is. And I think even Sir Frederick, in your presentation, you mentioned that. Who is that? Does that look like Bob Marley? Must be Bob Marley. And that's how much we really know. And I think we have to read more and find out more about him and how much he has contributed. Thank you. And I hope they've answered your question, sir.
Of course, of course, of course. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Next question. So Frederick has put forth to Rochelle. He says, thank you for building your awareness of Mahashweta Devi. Do you feel her work is sufficiently noticed among Indian writing in English? If not, why not?
Okay, so like I said earlier as well, that in Goa, not many people know about Mahashweta Devi. Outside Goa, quite a bit. And honestly, I think it's because in Goa we are very sheltered. Again, like I said, forgive me if you think I am wrong, but I just feel that the youth aren't as aware as we'd like them to be, or at least as much as I'd like them to be.
Okay. Thank you, Rochelle. Well, ahead, I mean, I think I would like to ask a question backing up that. Like, if you feel that our youth is not well informed, I mean, as teachers, um, how can we try and change that? We have a lot of students here, we have teachers here as well. So, it would be nice as you, as an individual, how would you like to change that?
Honestly, it's our syllabus, Aisha. We've been, I'm not, don't get me wrong, okay? I love the fact that everyone is still studying Shakespeare and Marlowe and all the other canonical texts. I actually love that. But the problem is that's all that our students end up knowing. How many of us actually study protest literature? How many of us actually know about caste rights? How many of us know actually what is happening in the remotest villages in India? We don't know that because we have not been exposed to that kind of thing. Our syllabus just tells us about Shakespeare and we know a little bit about, so now of course we have the motorcycle diary, so we've become aware of Che Guevara. But then like Frederick said earlier as well, and something that I also noticed during my time in Bangalore, people wear Che Guevara t-shirts and they wear bandanas. And if you ask them, like, like, who is this person? They're like, we don't know. Yeah, it looks cool on our t-shirt. But that's the problem, right? We don't know the essence of the man. We don't know the reason for him fighting or the reason he was fighting. And honestly, how else are we going to come up? How else are we going to gain awareness of this? I feel it's only through our syllabus.
Okay, I agree to you to a certain extent in this case, but I feel sometimes in our own power we need to do something at our level as well, because waiting for the syllabus to change, we have to wait 3 years or more, right?
Yeah, so
So yeah, I
that's
think webinars, yeah, webinars like this, or things that we organize can kind of craft a different perspective, and extra reading or also no matter how hard we find it to kind of get our students to read. But yeah, that is something that we can consider. And cinema, of course, and so many other things. Yeah, thank you. Anybody would like to add to this? So Frederick has
Aisha,
strong opinions in this, and I'm
Aisha,
really, I know.
strong opinions.
Yes,
I just want to add to what Rochelle said. See, because
yes,
blaming the younger generation is a fashion. They used to do it in our time. Okay, our parents used to do it in our time. So don't
agreed.
worry, youngsters. It's a fashion. When you all get kids, you all will blame them. But I think in Goa, it's a systemic problem in the sense that the systems are giving us problems. We don't read enough. Okay, and each one of us is to blame. While the syllabi and things like that are issues, each one of us is to blame because we don't read enough. We are not aware. Someone defined Kerala as a state of news junkies. Like, you see them reading newspapers, being aware of the global trends and all. And for a society which is so outwardly focused like ours, where everyone has some connection to the rest of the world, we have to know what is happening elsewhere. It's our job. Another small point I want to make. Someone said about, Brian said about no Latin American books in our bookshops. Okay, that is a serious problem. We don't have Asian, African, Latin American books, which is why Other India Bookstore was started 25, 40 years back by Claude and Norma Alvarez to get such books into Goa, into India. And they did a good job of it as long as they were doing it. But we need much more systems to work these things. Like 30 years back, they were talking about a new international information order where we can learn directly about Latin America without it going through Europe or without it going to New York or whatever. So they had a news agency called IPS. It still exists, Interpress Service, set up by the Latin Americans, trying to look at the world from a different point of view, not just disaster when it happens in the third world. Okay, all these issues were there. So I think, as people, we have to start by reading, as young, old, whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. I knew that was something coming from you. Being your student, I know there were strong opinions coming. And yeah, thank you so much for that insight.
Aisha, may I add?
Yes, please,
Can
go
I?
ahead.
Yeah. So, Frederick, actually, I also consider myself to be part of the youth. Okay. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone here, but it's just that I'll be very honest with you. I studied at Xavier's, and after Xavier's, I went to Bangalore to pursue my master's. And the first thing that a teacher asked us to do was to respond to an article. And I'm going to be very honest with you. We were four students there in that class, and none of us knew how to respond to an article, because in our idea of response it meant that, oh, was the article good, was it bad, was it understandable? I'm going to be very honest with you, and that year actually made me very miserable because I realized just how much I didn't know. Okay, and the thing is, in there when I studied, we were made to, okay, we were given a primary text for sure, but we were asked to focus more on the secondary text. So use the primary text as you can quote from there for sure, but then justify your argument with the primary text. And opinions was something that was very important there. Something which again I feel that we do not give too much attention to. So I think like I'm not actually blaming anyone. It's more of like a personal experience that I was sharing.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you for clarifying your point. I think we can go on to the next one. We are already at 12:40. We'll just finish with a few more questions. I actually had a couple of questions lined up myself, but I think keep that towards the end. We'll address the questions in the chat box first. Yeah, we have Anderson Fernandez here with his question. Rico, so Frederick, this is for you. What has been the influence of Che on the present leftist politicians in Goa, though there are just a handful of them left?
The assumption that the influence is small is not quite true. My reading shows that we are not aware. It has been throughout history for the last 110 years at least, if not more. So we are talking about 1910 onwards. So all the references are there. I will definitely share my paper with Anderson. It will become long and boring if I go into those details. But there was another point that I also wanted to raise. See, one of the students said during the plenary that it's confusing. Did they do the right thing? Did they do the wrong thing? Honestly, I've had many friends of mine, personal friends, who were in these moments. I was on the periphery of them. And at this point, I would not say, that whether it's right or wrong, it's a very difficult thing to say. The revolutionary dream is very, very attractive, but it's also full of pitfalls and risk and dangers. Okay. Some people have stuck their neck out and paid with their price. Two of the three Goans whom I mentioned, all three of them died. One in a plane crash, which the South Africans are supposed to have engineered. Two others died in fighting among themselves. So they paid a huge price. So whether they are right or wrong is a different point. We are not in a position to judge till today. Maybe they were right in some ways, maybe they were wrong. Maybe if they were in power, they would have become bad individuals. We don't know. But you have to admire what they did, why they did it, and the commitment with which they did it. And we have a responsibility to understand their actions. That's all.
I think I can add to this, or rather, I had a question, something similar to these lines. Like, with what is happening in Goa today, India today, we can see that our politicians are um, not really gi- adhering to the promises that they've made to us people. Like, let's come to ground level Goa. Let's not talk about India at this point, since Frederick also focused on Goa. Our Mole situation right now, we see young people taking a lot of responsibility, going onto the streets, protesting. Is that one of the things that we can kind of consider? They might not really think, oh, Che did this, or some communist party uh, influence. They're just doing it. They're protesting. But can we consider this as a new revolution, a new generation coming up. There's an uprising and standing up for what is correct, because that is what Chair believed as well.
You're asking me, Aisha?
It could be
You're
anybody.
asking me?
It's just my input. What do you, if anybody wants to say something, you can go ahead.
Basically, I think that, live your dreams and be honest about them. I don't have any answers. I don't think anyone has the answers. Uh, Live your dreams, be honest about it. Youth is an idealistic stage. Make the most of it. Think and act.
That's really well put, honestly. Thank you for that. I think we can move
What
on
do
to
the
the,
others feel? What do
yeah.
youngsters feel?
What do the students feel? What do you all think about this? Or even Rochelle, if you want to say something. A lot of young people here.
Aisha, I'm sorry, actually, I kind of missed what you said, so I
Oh,
didn't comment.
yeah. So I was saying that Sir was talking about how a lot of people lost their lives who were a part of revolution. Now we can kind of correlate this with our current situation in Goa as well, like what we are fighting for. That is with regards to Mole. It has nothing to do with communism or Marxism or Che, to be precise, but it is something that we are kind of taking into our own hands to fight against the government, for they are not really um, giving us what they promised.
So yeah, precisely, Aisha. I mean, this is exactly what my paper is actually looking at,
Yeah.
understanding dissent.
Yes.
Like you don't have to be a revolutionary to dissent. You don't have to be a rebel. You can just be a regular human being just dissenting. And the thing is, how is dissent actually treated? Like what I was saying was the fact that the government knows that the people of Goa are so against this whole project, this Mole project, as they call it, for development. They still are ignoring the fact that it's that people don't want it. So I feel like after some time, this is when dissent is actually going to, you know, go into more of a get into more of a revolutionary kind of phase. I feel like when dissent is ignored, then the whole violence thing comes out. So
Exactly.
this is
I
what I feel.
completely agree. Like I had made a comment when I was reading your paper, with how when young people try and revolt, they are not taken seriously because they are young. They feel there's no enough experience, right? Uh, but we do have relevant things to say, and
For sure.
yeah, and at some point it will prevail. It's all that I would like to comment. Yeah, so let's go on to the next question. Let's see if there is any. So Frederick put down a comment here saying, Rochelle, I don't know if Father Stan would see himself as a revolutionary or a simple campaigner for human rights. Of course, the line can be blurred, especially in these times. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
Frederick, perhaps you can just call him a dissenter. Okay,
okay,
we don't have to like label him, but we can perhaps just call him a dissenter.
um, yeah, Anderson. I would love to hear your voice. If yeah, because you have a lot of questions here, so you could please give in your input as well. Your question, I'd like to read out your question. A revolutionary is one who acts or causes a complete or dramatic change. Stan Swami is in the game since the last 42 years. So I think of him more as a HR activist rather than a revolutionary IMHO. So yeah, would you like to comment on that and explain a little more? Your voice is not clear at all. There is a lot of disturbance.
I think the question is very clear from my end.
Yes.
So maybe if Frederick wants to respond to it, or Madam Rochelle. I mean,
Yeah, so
it's just a
actually,
comment. It's not a question.
Yes.
yeah, so actually, in my paper at the very beginning, I kind of talk about what I've come to understand as the meaning of dissent. And I've quoted the German writer Falk, and I even said that the term dissent is derived from the Latin verb dissenter, literally meaning to differ in sentiment. And in political theory, dissent is associated with one, a difference of opinion with regards to existing norms or legal political structures, two, disagreement with these norms and structures, and therefore even the ability to challenge these norms and structures. Dissent therefore implies both the possibility and the opportunity to engage with and criticize the status quo. So that's how I would respond to something like this.
Anderson, I would not want to get into hair splitting or definitions because that can be problematic. But I will say one thing, from our younger days, we had a lot of student activists around us, all around. Unlike now, where the times are more depoliticized and things like that. In us, I always learned to appreciate someone's commitment to a cause, whether I agreed with the cause or not. And activism keeps changing, whether it's human rights, revolution, whether it's environment, whether it is literary activism, someone who's committed to a cause, even which I don't agree with. I would always appreciate that. Aisha, unmute Aisha.
Sorry, I'm about that. Yeah, would you like to add something to this, Anderson? We couldn't quite hear you clearly.
No, thanks. I think the clarifications were excellent. Thanks, Frederick. Thanks, Madam Rochelle.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think I had put down a few comments when your presentations were on, so I would like to share those with you. With Sir Frederick, I already posed the question about our young generation kind of taking things into their own hands, or rather revolting or protesting to be heard. So I think that question was answered. With regards to Simone and Sila, so we can see that India has continued to kind of support Cuba and vice versa, and this was probably possible because of Che's intervention, right? And do you think that this kind of a relation was able to develop because of the similar struggles that both countries kind of witnessed? Are you all with me?
Hey, could you repeat your question, please? I didn't get
Yeah,
you.
so what I'm trying to say is that India and Cuba has managed to maintain their relationship for a long time, okay, with or without Che's intervention, or rather, it was because of him it started off, right? Is it because both of the countries kind of struggled in a similar fashion and wanted to support each other? Do you all think that, or do you all have any other opinion?
No, I think that they wanted to support each other because, well, they wanted to import and export stuff,
So it was strictly
and
business, is what you're implying.
well, they wanted to maintain good relations for like the UN and stuff like that. They wanted to be friends because Nehru admired socialism.
Okay,
And so,
yeah, thank you so much. Um, yeah, I think with regards to Rochelle, we've kind of answered this question. All I wanted to say is that for being young and having strong opinions, we are given tags to young people of being terrorists, anti-national, and that idea is kind of changing in times now, right? Slowly but steadily, hopefully. So, yeah, I would you want to say something about that, or it would just be a repetition? Like you already said,
Just a
yeah,
repetition.
yeah.
Yeah.
You since you said, I think what we need to focus on just dissent. Yeah. With regards to Sunia, what do you think? She has kind of given us an overview of Chair's life. What do you think of him? What is your opinion about Chair?
My opinion about him is like he have was quite disturbed because of the gender poverty, which we can see mostly in India also, but still we are in poverty only. It's not developed totally. And he wanted to make
better, like he wanted to give a progress towards that poverty or something like that. Because as I have mentioned, like he came to India and he had saw many things, and he have also learned also throughout, like what progress we can take place to remove the poverty from the country. So that's all
Thank
I
you
have to
so
say.
much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So thank you all for participating, and I hope you all had a good time and a lot of learning happened here today. And yeah, thank you so much once again. I would request you all to join the valedictory session soon. It is actually supposed to start by around 12:45. No, at around 1 o'clock. But y'all can start joining in. Hopefully, we'll open the link soon enough. Yeah.
Aisha, thank you. Thank you for your chairing. You've done a very good job.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure having you and everybody
Thank
else as well. Yeah. Thank you, and see you in some time at the valedictory. Thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Dwani. Thank you, everybody. I think we can start leaving this session now.